referred to as the three city states, the Vatican, City of London, and is it Washington, D.C.?
I can't, without like going on a huge tangent, I could say like the Commonwealth status definitely is why the CIA is headquartered there, and they have certain
privileges,
ancient like legal like loopholes that they take advantage of for various things. We'll get into that in another time, but some interesting context for the people of Virginia and like the idea of like being a commonwealth instead of a state is in the War of 1812, right? So the War of 1812 was when the British, right, after we won, or after they decided to leave in 1776, right, we declared independence. They left, and then they regrouped and came back in 1812, and they were pretty much rolling on us, right? To the degree where they like burned the White House down. Like the White House got burned to the ground in the War of 1812. They were just lighting us up, and they were taking us back over. And the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I'm not sure exactly what the city was. I don't want to like mess that up. It was Raleigh, I want to say, but I could be wrong. But one of the main cities in Virginia just bribed the British Army, made deals with the British Army to where like, oh, well, we're not involved in the war. Well, here's some money. Just don't mess with us. So they literally, when we were getting invaded, switched sides and just like, so that's one thing that gets brushed under the rug during history, right? That was pretty sketchy thing of them to do, and it's never talked about. So if you look at the seal of the governor's office in Alabama, I want to say. I think it's got one of those royal family seals. I don't know if it's Benton or I forgot which one, but they have some very sketchy symbols. So they have a lot of cheeky little symbols and remnants of the past world that they used to control us. The Commonwealth of Virginia is definitely one of those things. And just more on that 1812 thing. The reason that Trump, you know how he always like makes these Andrew Jackson comparisons?
Yep.
He's super keen on the whole Andrew Jackson thing. So the idea of Andrew Jackson, or the reason he likes Andrew Jackson so much, is because Andrew Jackson is the guy who he went down to New Orleans. So if you get access to New Orleans and you control the mouth of the Mississippi River, you essentially control the waterways into the entire American heartland, right? Because the Mississippi is a waterway that connects, the Mississippi River is a waterway that connects up to Minnesota, right? It goes as far as Minnesota, it goes into Iowa, it goes up to Chicago, like up to the Great Lakes. So if you control the Mississippi River militarily, you could essentially keep the United States like surrounded. You could cut off their access to like where they grow a lot of their food, right? So in the War of 1812, Andrew Jackson kind of made his name for himself by kind of rounding up a bunch of slaves, just random free people, Indian, like all just a huge smorgasbord of people, and they end up like having a huge showdown and keeping like fending the British Navy off from taking New Orleans. And that pretty much is what saved America as a country, right? Because if they wouldn't have defeated the British there, the British would have gotten that critical foothold. They've been able to kind of reinforce behind. So we would have been done without Andrew Jackson holding them off in the war or leading the battle that held them out of New Orleans in the War of 1812. So that's kind of why Trump loves that Andrew Jackson symbolism so much. I know a lot of people think it's weird because Jackson was he was a Democrat. He's like the guy who founded the original Democrat Party. Yeah. And the reason it's a donkey is because they're like, oh, his political opponents say, oh, that like stubborn jackass Andrew Jackson, right? So that was the joke. And so he took it, he wore it as a flex, and he was like, all right, I'm making that jackass my logo. Like this jackass is about to walk all over you guys. So that's how that's the guy who started the Democratic Party and like back in the day. And that's kind of where their donkey logo came from, if you're ever wondering.
We were actually.
I always thought it was weird. Yeah.
That gets overlooked a lot, like his contributions to the war in 1812, because he was also the guy that initiated the Trail of Tears. So when they forced all the Native Americans to move, leave the Midwest and force them to move to reservations in the West, that was Andrew Jackson who did that. Wow. And people don't realize that and I'm not like defending anyone right now. It was like a pretty brutal thing to do. So don't if anybody's watching this, don't take this as me like, defending that tactic. I'm just providing a little context. Was that the British Empire, when they were coming back to get us in the war in 1812, one of the things that made it so hard for us was they made alliances with a bunch of tribes up in like Michigan and up in the Midwest. So we had all these tribes fighting us. They were joined with the British fighting us, and the reason that they were able to exist, not like 100% like peacefully. Obviously, they were treated pretty bad, but the whole time. But they were treated extra brutally after that was because they joined the British and fought against us. It was led by a guy named Tecumseh, right? Which is another. I always tell. Like I call Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido is like a Tecumseh, right? He's like the useful idiot of the foreign power to try to like fight, picking battles that he has no chance of winning, but like doing it on behalf of foreign power and getting kind of like hustled. So they Tecumseh's Indians or his Native American tribes that fought against the United States, that they got driven west after they tried to help overthrow us. That's why kind of the United States cracked down on all the Native Americans and really like went from pretty bad to like extremely bad of like, you're all getting forced at gunpoint to march, 1,000 miles west, and you're going to stay where we put you.
Wow.
So one of the tribes, I'm not sure. I think it was not the Trail of Tears. It was another resettlement later on. But one of the tribes that got moved west was the Apache tribe, who's my customer. And those Apache tribes up in Arizona, that's, if you've ever heard of a chief leader called Geronimo.
Yep.
Geronimo was an Apache.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, I like to say he's such a formidable Indian, such a like hardcore guy that white people now, hundreds of years later, that have no idea who that is, when they're like jumping off a tall cliff, like it's like you're gonna die in this water or whatever, they're like Geronimo. So that's how badass that guy was. That people hundreds of years later have no idea who he was. He's shouting his name when they're doing crazy stuff. Like the operation to get Osama bin Laden, I think had something. Geronimo was somewhere in the net. It was like Operation Geronimo.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
So they still use that name a lot. So that guy's an Apache, and those Apaches are in Arizona. So
Right.